Hi, Dr. Beebe Dericks. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy to have you here on the Genetic Genius podcast. And before we dive in, let's just talk about who you are, your passion, so our listeners can learn about who you are and your role on the planet.
Awesome. I love it. I'm so honored to be here with you, Dr. Lulu. It's really my
Yay.
pleasure. Such a treat. So I'm Dr. Beebe Dericks. I'm a naturopathic doctor and acupuncturist, a Chinese herbal medicine specialist, and I practice holistic pelvic care. I'm also certified as a birth healing provider, and I feel like it's my passion in this world to help future generations by supporting the mothers that are birthing those future generations. So much of the work that I do is helping women become more embodied within themselves, within their dreams, their hopes, their wishes, their desires, their wants, allowing them to feel their true potential and energetic streamline of what they're here to do, and to give them access to the magic that belongs in their bodies, that they deserve,
Wow.
that's their birthright.
Yeah, well, that's so powerful. I just love that. Your passion just, exudes from every cell when you're talking about it. It's just so beautiful. That's great. There's so many things I want to talk about with you today, but at first I just want to talk about the holistic pelvic care, that aspect, because it's just such a fascinating part of what you do. And I think our our listeners, viewers will be super excited just to kind of hear about what that entails. So first,
Yeah.
can you just talk about what the pelvic floor is?
Yeah, I love the pelvic floor. So the pelvic floor, essentially, I wish I had my pelvic floor model here. It's in my work office, my workspace. But the pelvic floor embodies, I mean, more than 30 or 40 muscles that essentially make up multiple layers that create the pelvic floor. So if you think of, the way I like to explain it to patients is, if you think of the neck as holding up the head, the pelvic floor is really the part of the body that holds up everything above it.
Mm-hmm.
So, our necks get stiff and tight and sore, and we don't think twice about going in to get a neck massage or a shoulder massage or help any of those muscles. But we
Mm-hmm.
do culturally feel a lot of shame when anything comes to our pelvic floor spaces, right? The
Mm-hmm.
vagina, the uterus, the ovaries. Anytime a woman feels, menstrual irregularities, she takes it as, in my opinion, right, as a form of shame. Like there's something wrong with her
Yeah.
body. She's done
Mm-hmm.
something incorrectly. And that's not the case at all. So I think that we need to normalize within our culture having that part of our body tended to and cared for in the same way we would our neck, our muscles, and our shoulders. So the
Mm-hmm.
pelvic floor houses our GI tract organs, a lot of them, right, in the lower part, our
Right.
uterus, our ovaries, and so many muscles.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. The pelvis itself is just a fascinating part of our body, which most people don't really know about. Right. It's like when you talk about it, which I'm so glad you're explaining it to our listeners, because it's like there's a lot of different components that come in to making up the pelvic floor. But I really loved what you were
Yeah.
saying too about like the association with like the shame and the trauma. And so I will have time to dive into that a little bit more in detail, I think, as well. Can you talk about what it looks like? So you have a specific part of your practice, the holistic pelvic care, and what is that all about?
Yeah, so I trained in my work with Tammy Lynn Kent, who is the author of Wild Feminine, Mothering from Your Center, and Wild Creation. And
Mm-hmm.
Tammy Lynn Kent changed my life. Working with her really opened me to the possibility within the female body.
Mm-hmm.
So holistic pelvic care essentially is just coordinating support for the spirit, the mind, and the body all in one. So honoring the woman before you,
Mm-hmm.
working with the fascia to release any tension in the pelvis, allow lymphatic flow to come back to the pelvis. And then from the point of view that the fascia and the spirit align in some way, we can talk about
Right.
Chinese medicine and the idea that the meridians run along fascial planes, and how, in Chinese medicine, we can access the spirit and have windows to the sky and all of these incredible points that are very in tune, right, with a bigger part of ourselves than we're often aware of. Through that, we can access a really deep place within the woman, the
Mm-hmm.
place within her that houses her dreams, her wishes, her hopes, her desires, her wants, all of those incredibly potent, rich parts of a woman. And so in holistic pelvic care, we can actually go in and do intravaginal massage, support a woman to bring breath in a way that's very similar to biofeedback, but more
Mm-hmm.
in real time with no equipment, right? Just a more hands-on approach, and allow a woman to come back into that part of her body. Allow a woman
Wow.
to start to dream, to hold her wishes and dream seeds in that place. And so if you want to learn more about holistic pelvic care, you can go onto Tammy Kent's website and check it out. You can read Wild Feminine. Her books are just incredible with
Wow.
allowing women back into their bodies.
That's so beautiful. It just sounds like the word holistic is all about, the whole being. And I love that you're not just, helping women with just the pelvis. It's all connected to the emotional body, the physical body, the mental body, which is all about what our care is as naturopathic physicians anyway, right? But still,
Exactly.
it's like, working from that pelvis just changes, if we think about it from the energetic point of view, even from the chakras, it's connecting us to the earth and connecting from that seed place to the heart center, to the upper levels. Like, it just creates this beautiful connection space.
Exactly.
So you were talking about fascia just a little bit. Can you explain to our listeners what fascia is? It's just like some people are like, what is
Yeah.
that? It's like, is that something you eat, like focaccia? And how that plays a role. And you were talking about like intravaginal massage. Is that part, is it connected to that?
Absolutely. So if we think back to the concept, right, that our neck holds our head, and our pelvic floor and pelvis, right, our hips hold the upper body. That's a tremendous amount of weight and pressure that's constantly on that part of our body, kind of this fulcrum of movement and tension. Anytime you go to grab your water glass, right, or brush your teeth, you're using your pelvic floor. And who knew, right?
Right.
So when we think about fascia, the way I love to think about it is if you imagine a sheet on a bed, and if you were to tug one corner of a sheet, you would actually see the tension line all the way on the other side of the bed, right?
Yeah.
And you might even start to see it on all the four corners, the
Right.
three other corners that aren't being
Yeah.
pulled upon. So think about that. Or you can think about a pillowcase, if that's easier to imagine. You're pulling on one end, you can feel the tension on the other. So fascia is essentially the connective tissue that holds the human body together. It envelops and wraps around organs, around muscles, just below the surface of the skin. It goes everywhere.
Wow.
And so fascial tension lines, right? We know that if I have fascial tension, here's an example. A lot of new studies are coming out about cesarean births.
Right.
And a lot of my work through holistic pelvic care and the type of care that I've adapted over the years supports women through cesarean recovery. And that's something that I think we really need to honor within our culture, that we've like lost that the cesarean birth is a real birth, that it's a difficult recovery for many women, and that it disrupts the fascia because you're literally cutting into this connective tissue. But we're finding that the pelvic floor is so related to the fascia on the feet. So people are finding that actually going and getting foot massages and releasing the fascia on their feet can actually help them recover from cesarean birth injuries.
Oh, how fascinating. I love that.
So the way that I address fascia in my work is, we've talked about holistic pelvic care to support this, fascial connection by relaxing and releasing all of the fascia, that really tight, thick connective tissue in the pelvis. And what's really beautiful about the fascia is the fascia can respond to more aggressive stimulus and touch, right? A lot of people will do that. Like you think of gua sha and cupping in Chinese medicine, right? That addresses fascia.
Right.
But holistic pelvic care can be very direct. However, it typically is more of a gentle touch that allows unwinding of this really thick connective tissue. And if you think about, I'm trying to think of a type of, well, just using, the warmth of your finger, like you can feel the warmth in your touch.
Skin.
And we know that, if you have a hot stone massage, those hot stones really help your body to relax and unwind. It's the same way. If you bring warmth with light, gentle touch to fascia, it starts to unravel and unwind, and it allows the body to have free flow of movement. The other important thing about fascia that I love to think about is that if you were to take the human body, remove all of the skin, remove the bones, the fascia, and you could even take away the muscles, right? The fascia would still hold up the human form. It's that intense.
That's amazing. And it's such like a small part. People don't even think about, what it is or how it's connected, its role in helping us to maintain physical form. and like you said, with the tension of the sheet in the pillowcase, so, like, oh, my back hurts, or how releasing another part of the body can make such a difference to some other type of referred pain that we might be feeling in another part of our body.
Exactly. So, and it's that back to that cesarean birth analogy,
Mm-hmm.
right? Of if you're feeling pain in your pelvis, it could really be the fascial tension in your toes,
Right.
just like you
That's so
you were
great.
alluding to,
I'm gonna
which
go
is
get a foot
amazing.
massage right away.
Got
And so, I love what you were saying about the cesarean birth, and that change that as a society we need to focus on, because, I've seen videos. I haven't been in actual in the presence of a cesarean birth, but I've seen the videos of what it looks like, and it just seems so traumatizing for the body. I mean, birth itself is traumatizing, but then to have this whole layer of addition where you're like cutting through the fascia, like you said, and just changing everything about the inside of the mother. And then I'm like, yeah, here you go. You're ready to just start back on things and get going again. So I think that is important, what you're saying about changing our societal view about women going through the cesarean. And it's coming, I don't know, more commonplace, it seems like, because for the convenience factor, it's like, oh, I'm just going to go in and I'm going to schedule my birth on blah, blah, blah date. And then boom, I'm going to be home and I'm going to be ready to go.
And it's not like that at all. I'll share from personal experience.
Yeah, I
I
love
labored
that.
for 4 days with my daughter.
Wow.
And after 2.5 days, I transferred to the hospital. And
Mm-hmm.
our birth ended up with a cesarean. My daughter was believed to have sepsis, and so she was in the
Mm-hmm.
NICU after birth. But my recovery from my cesarean birth was one of the most incredible opportunities for the deepest type of healing I could have ever imagined in this
Mm.
lifetime.
Yeah, that's where
That,
we learn the most, right?
yep, when you're in it. And I realized as a provider, especially specializing in the pelvic floor,
Mm-hmm.
that this was a gift, that it was a gift so that I could fully understand what it meant to recover. And with someone with body awareness, I had the true ability to feel those fascial, the tension lines and experience them unwinding with cranial sacral, with visceral manipulation,
Mm-hmm.
with holistic
Mm-hmm.
pelvic care and other pelvic floor modalities.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot involved in the healing process, but having that personal perspective just probably, like you said, just completely changed your practice and allowed you to relate to the women that are going through these same experiences in so much of a deeper way.
Absolutely. And I share it openly because there is so much cultural shame around cesarean deliveries and birth,
Mm-hmm.
as though a woman didn't actually deliver her baby or give birth.
Right.
And I think we need to culturally change cesarean to cesarean birth, because it's not just
Mm-hmm.
cesarean delivery, right? It's a
Right.
cesarean birth. A woman
Yeah.
puts her energy, her intention. And
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of ways, I feel like making that decision is kind of it's the last cry of the warrior, right?
Right. Yeah.
Before death. And that we need to honor that so much goes into those decision-making processes. Especially, it's different if a woman chooses to have a cesarean birth. I still think that just by choice of scheduling and planning a birth, that
Right.
there's an incredible warriors coming
Totally.
through to do
Yeah.
that, to
Yes,
enter into that
exactly.
unknown space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it
But
still creates a whole different, this mindset, and I can't even imagine just the whole process of it. Like you said, like calling in that divine feminine warrior is so powerful for the birthing process.
absolutely. And I'll share that I got to have a vaginal delivery after cesarean with my
Mm-hmm.
son.
Oh,
And
great.
it was a tremendously powerful experience to be able to feel the two different energies. One
Mm.
of the things that holistic pelvic care does is, so if someone has a traumatic delivery or a cesarean birth delivery where the energy of the pelvis
Mm-hmm.
doesn't get to fully birth their creation,
Mm,
which is what I
right.
felt after,
Yeah.
post cesarean birth, was, wow, I have all of this creative potential. I'm so full of this like abundant thought and idea and dreams
Mm-hmm.
that I want to birth into the world, but I don't know how to get them out of my body.
Mm,
Right. So I felt
right.
like that energy was trapped within me.
Yeah.
And so holistic pelvic care really allows a woman to experience birthing, the completion of that birth process,
Mm.
to allow the energy to flow completely through her body and come back to the baby. And Tammy Lynn Kent has this incredible viewpoint of birth, and
Mm-hmm.
this concept that, you know, the universe kind of opens up like an aperture during
Right.
as the birth door, right, and death door.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the
Mm-hmm.
same door, right? But there's this like beautiful contraction and expansion
Mm-hmm.
before a birth process, and that
Right.
right before birth, that energy opens from the universe, allows the spirit, you know, body to come through and
Mm-hmm.
connect with mom. And so mom is kind of like receiving this energy, almost
Mm.
this like crystalline mandala form, you know,
Right.
from behind her, and the energy
Yeah.
comes through from the universe into the mom's body, connects with the baby, and births with the baby. So that
Mm.
anytime throughout that baby's life, if a mother wants to connect in to give a little bit of extra love, let's say, you know, you birth your baby and your baby goes to the NICU, or later on, you know,
Mm-hmm.
your baby you know, is in the hospital and you need to send them love, you
Right.
can kind of reconnect into that divine energy,
Mm.
allow that flow to come through a meditation, and bring
Mm-hmm.
it to baby, so that your heart energy, your holding energy is with your child. And so
Mm.
that can get cut off, and that energy is a
Mm-hmm.
part of who we are, right? That
Right.
we are all deserving of this universal magic and flow.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true and so beautiful to have that connection. And I just love the way you describe it. And so when you're talking about for that healing part of the holistic pelvic care, then the mother can have that reconnection, or that almost like that finishing point, it sounds like, where things weren't quite, evolved or processed in the way that
Exactly.
she had originally imagined, or the spirit of the little baby too.
Kind of like
Hmm.
that aha moment. And
Right. Yeah.
I felt this, you know, tremendous. I mean, in birthing my son and having a vaginal delivery with him,
Hmm.
he was born OP, which
Hmm.
is pretty incredible. So he came out that way,
Yeah.
sunny side up.
Yeah.
But in that moment, I just felt this incredible like opening of the universe, as though,
Wow.
you know, as though I it's something that I didn't feel in my daughter's birth, right? I felt this
Mhm.
tremendous satisfaction with having her handed to me in my arms, but
Yeah.
it really felt like there was just so much energy stuck in my pelvis. Whereas with my son, having
Mhm.
this vaginal delivery, I felt him in my arms right away.
Wow, that's such
And
a
it,
difference. And the two, I never heard it explained that way. And I just love that, just for the listeners to be able to hear the difference, because I think a lot of people don't understand that process and the difference that it makes in the birth. And sometimes you don't have that choice. You don't know when it's going to happen. They're like you were explaining with your first birth. It's like, sometimes you just have to go to the hospital and things just happen. And so how do you then recover from that trauma, not only from not being able to be guided in the choice, but also then to not feel that connection. So it sounds like your work is really powerful in helping to reconnect with that experience.
thank you, Dr. Lulu. I love this
Mhm.
work more than anything.
Yeah, it shows through in your passion. Um, so what do you recommend that someone should start seeing you for this pelvic floor care? Like, should it be before they are thinking about even having a baby in the preconception phase? Should it be during the process, after? How does that look like for a patient coming to see you?
So I have two kind of answers for that question.
Mm-hmm.
One is, so let's say there's an atypical situation, or something going on in a woman's body like endometriosis or fibroids. We want to
Mm-hmm.
maximize the opportunity for conception.
And can you explain, just to interrupt, well, not just to explain what that is for the listener, what endometriosis is and fibroids, once you're finished with that thought.
Yep. So if a woman has endometriosis or fibroids,
Mm-hmm.
or pelvic pain or scar tissue formation, that maybe
Mm.
she had a laparoscopic surgery or something happened, or maybe a history of ectopic pregnancy or something, or a history of an
Mm.
STI that
Yeah,
caused a lot of a sexually transmitted infection that
right.
can cause scar tissue and inflammation in the pelvis. Or if a woman has celiac, that's something that I've seen often too, where
Mm-hmm.
celiac can actually prevent a lot of fluid formation in the fallopian tubes. It just creates so much fluid and fluid retention in the body that there's
Yeah.
swelling. So a woman might not be able to get pregnant and find out she has celiac kind of through that route,
Oh, how
through
interesting.
nutrient deficiencies, and then
Mm-hmm.
more of a systemic inflammation, which I see in other things too. But
Yeah.
those are kind of the areas that I see a lot more often, kind of like the scar tissue formation, the fibroids, endometriosis, and then some kind of underlying nutrient deficiency that we have to uncover and resolve.
Right.
But with those, what I love to do is start working with a woman, 6 months before she's even thinking about trying to conceive. Because
Okay.
what I
So
want to do
yeah,
is I
way
want to
before.
regulate. I want to regulate menstrual cycles.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
And I want to help a woman with different nutraceuticals and manual therapy to help reduce scar tissue, resolve it. I use a lot of cold laser in my practice, red light therapy, which upregulates the energy production in the cell by boosting the mitochondria's ability to make ATP.
Yeah.
And so I really like starting early with those conditions. I like making sure that a woman has a couple of cycles without pain. And the really cool thing is a lot of what I would do for a woman to boost and maximize her fertility would be to start 3 to 4 months, depending on her toxic burden, right? If she has a high level of toxic burden, just a lot of chemicals in her system that she's been exposed to, then what I might do is say, okay, let's start, 8 months before you're trying to conceive. Let's work on decreasing the toxins in your system for 2 to 3 good months. And then let's work on trying to get pregnant. Because what you don't want to do is mobilize all these toxins and chemicals within the body while you're trying to conceive, because so it takes about 3 to 4 months from beginning to end for maturation of an egg and sperm. And so you don't want to have toxins around during that maturation. The same way when a woman is pregnant, you don't want her to be exposed to any chemicals.
Right. Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So we want to kind of flush the system, reset it. And by doing detoxification, what we're able to do is I would say for the majority of women, fibroids and endometriosis and other menstrual irregularities are in part due to abnormal estrogen metabolism. Right. So come back to that. And a lot of infertility also comes back to improper estrogen metabolism. I mean, we live in a culture. I have an awesome article that I refer to a lot with my patients out of the International Journal of Herbal Medicine. And it basically just states that the modern lifestyle is a problem to fertility, right?
Right.
It's a threat for our fertility. When you think about, it talks about BPA in plastic containers. It talks about detergents, chemicals in water. It talks about nonstick cookware, caffeine. It talks about food additives, trans fatty acids, diet sodas and drinks, obesity, phytoestrogens.
Wow.
In male sperm. So when men actually consume a lot of soy products, it can downregulate their semen production.
Yeah.
And low fat products, which are loaded with a lot of nasty things. And genetically, a lot of women can't convert omega fatty acid type 3, right, to 6s.
Exactly.
And so with that in mind, if a woman's a vegetarian and she's not getting any fish sources of omega 6, then she might not have any. And so that means that her whole cell structure, right, is compromised.
Yeah, the whole phospholipid bilayer, which we completely need for so many different functions.
So kind of going back to, how do we re-educate a woman to live in our modern society in the safest, most productive way possible? And how do we support her, right, to detox her home, her makeup products, her hair products? Scented products are the worst. I have to say, if you have scented candles in your home that aren't made from pure essential oils, you got to ditch them. Yeah. That is, scented dryer sheets, Febreze, Glade plugins, that stuff is toxic. Tide detergent. I probably shouldn't be giving brands, but we just need to be aware, right? When we smell something, if it's not a natural scent, it's our cribiform plate, right? And the nasal hair cells are right, literally, like just right there, right? Within
so close to the brain.
Right next to our brain. And so when we can smell something, it's already impacted our brain by the time
the signal's already been there.
The really cool part is that essential oils can actually bind to those receptor sites and block them from receiving the chemicals in our environment, which is awesome. Something to think about. But to also, make sure you have a good education in essential oils and what's safe.
Yeah, super important too. And so let's go back and talk about, so that was a lot of great things you brought up there. So in the process of like being toxic, which I think people have so many different ideas of even what that means, right? So how does someone know if they're toxic? And what does that look like when they're coming to see you? Is there specific testing you could do? Are there maybe some symptoms that they might have going on, which I know as a practitioner, that can be really huge. But what do you look for, or what should a listener be looking for and seeking out care? Oh, hey, I'm thinking about having a baby. How do I even know if I have toxins in my house? You were just describing all those amazing things for people to start looking at.
Yes. So let me first start by saying that when a woman chooses to optimize her fertility, she's not just changing herself and that baby, she gets to make a huge genetic imprint in the future generations that come, all the future generations that come.
Right.
It's that same idea, right? That the egg that I was in my grandmother, right? And that was in, great grandmother.
Right.
And so our genetic material, right, goes back many generations. So that same idea that if a woman chooses today to offset any genetic imbalances now by doing some kind of detoxification, then she's affecting, her lineage line for eons, right?
Which is so important. Oh my God, that's like the hugest key right there, is to how can we change our genetic makeup to change the planet, and how do we do that? By having better offspring.
Yeah, it's the biggest gift that we can give. So I want to put that there first, because it's a lot of work to do a detox.
Right.
It is.
It is. It's not easy.
And sometimes we might not even know a woman's full level of toxins until she starts a detoxification and starts to have symptoms.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And toxic burden can be so buried in the cells. And when it starts to come out, you're like, I don't feel so good, Dr. Beebe. What's happening?
Exactly. Headache, fatigue, feeling lightheaded. Sometimes, I see like high blood pressure, other comorbidities can show up, right, as a reflection of some of this like toxic waste and toxic burden that's in our bodies. And so when we start mobilizing fat tissue by breaking it down, let's say we do a detoxification, we're trying to lose a little bit of weight, or someone might say, hey, I started exercising more, right? Like I started thinking about having a baby. I started trying to meditate, exercise a little bit more. I feel my joints are really creaky and achy. I'm feeling, a little bit more fatigue. I in the middle of a day, I feel this like incredible slump, or my menstrual cycle is, irregular, right? All of those things are good indications that someone is a little bit off
in their regular rhythm, it sounds like.
And that oftentimes relates back to detoxification and toxic burden.
Right. Yeah. And so that toxic load can look different between each person and what they might be experiencing.
Absolutely. And I see it a lot, it can come up with headache. It can come up with, and sometimes, toxic burden can be, this is an example of, I have a couple patients who have had a lot of systemic pain in their bodies. One patient is in her mid 20s and she had an IUD placed, and within weeks of the IUD, she started experiencing incredible hip pain. Well, the IUD was causing a lot of inflammation in her body. She went to a hip doctor and they said, it looks like you need to have a complete hip surgery.
Oh my gosh.
Bilateral hip replacement.
Right.
In her 20s. And so she, luckily I've been working with her, and I just told her, we need to get that IUD out and see what happens. So she removes the IUD, and very quickly her body is back to normal. There's, she doesn't need to have a hip surgery.
Right. Yeah. That's what I love about naturopathic medicine too. It's like, we look at like, when did the symptoms start? Or like, when did you start having a change in your body? And that's like the root. And then what stemmed from that, instead of being like, how can, you have this going on, let's just remove it.
Which I see so often. Right. And a lot of women, so here's another example of kind of toxic burden. A patient of mine came to see me because her primary care doctor, so this patient was referred to me by her myo-abdominal massage therapist, and she has had endometriosis and a history of infertility for her whole life. This specific patient has a lot of estrogen metabolism issues in her system. Yeah. And so I'm trying to be careful to not give too much information away about my patient as I tell the story. But in coming to see me, she basically was like, look, this is my last ditch effort. I've never been to a naturopathic doctor. I'm here to see you because I don't want to have a hysterectomy, or this OB was recommending, because of the severe pelvic pain that she experienced because of her estrogen overload, that she wanted to remove the pelvic floor nerves that innervate the uterus. Oh my gosh. And said that if we do this, you're going to have a cesarean birth, because it wouldn't be safe for you to deliver vaginally, because you wouldn't be able to feel any pain. Which I just thought, well, that's just crazy, because our body has these signaling mechanisms in place for a reason. Right.
They're supposed to be there.
Exactly. We need to be able to experience the pain to know what's happening within our bodies, and to have that deeper connection and that messaging system. Yeah. Right. And so we started working together, and this is really crazy to me to even be able to communicate verbally, but within one cycle, her pain was gone. Wow. And what's even crazier is I referred her to another ND, And the other ND was looking at the nutraceuticals I put her on. They were like, I just don't understand why you put her on all these things. And I was like, oh, well, did she not tell you about her pelvic pain?
Right.
And they were like, no, she didn't tell me. And I was like, oh, well, let's backtrack and let me tell you about the pelvic pain. And they're like, oh my gosh, this is incredible, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That, you know, we hear so many stories like that as naturopathic physicians, and I'm always amazed at, you know, I totally appreciate the allopathic medical model for specific things. But then when it comes to our medicine and being able to look at the whole system of the person and change their life, and we see that so many times, it's just amazing. You know, it's like, oh yeah, within, you know, not happens all the time. Like I feel better in a month, but a lot of times it does, you know, and they don't even remember, like you said, like,
Exactly.
oh, I totally forgot about that.
They have no idea. So
No idea.
if we kind of like backtrack to you know, ways that we might know that we have toxic burden or toxic load.
Let's go back to that. That's great.
One of the major indicators, especially for women, because of estrogen recirculation, is, you know, have you been on oral contraception in your life? Where did you live? Did you live near a farm? Did you live near a golf course? Right? There's lots of questionnaires that we have in our medicine. But for me, you know, I like to kind of ask questions about what kind of products do you use in your home? Tell me, you know, you can oftentimes determine toxic burden by the number of products someone's using. Shaving cream, right? A lot of studies have been done. It's easier to do studies on men for male infertility, because if you think about sperm, right, it's a lot easier to see because sperm are ejaculated, right? They come out into the world, whereas we'd have to actually retrieve an egg. It's harder to do a study that way.
Right. Yeah. And we as women don't have as many eggs as there are sperm.
Exactly. And so, because a man can just ejaculate his sperm, right? And we can test it. We can determine all of the different environmental impacts that can be had on like sperm morphology, on the quantity of sperm, and the viability of that sperm.
Which is totally changing.
It is changing. And the number of products a man uses directly, like facial care products or cosmetic products, right? Hair care products, all of that directly relates to the health of his sperm. And if we think about, you know, what we determine as normal for male sperm, for count, morphology, all of the stuff that we look at, those numbers were not normal 20, you know, even 10 years ago. It seems like every 10 to 20 years, we have to actually downgrade what normal means because of our toxic environment reducing the effectiveness of a man's sperm.
Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see too, with the change that we're having with the pandemic, you know, that has a lot of different factors, but, you know, I'm thinking from that environmental aspect, you know, and people having less, access to specific things like beauty products and all those things they might have been using, they're starting to make their own things, you know, like something that's more natural. And they're going to, you know, how is the planet being affected in this great positive way that then they don't have the external toxicants from pollution and things like that, you know? So it'll be interesting to see. I don't know if they'll have a study, but the impact of the, you know, I know we're going to see a lot of changes. They'll be able to ID from this specific time, like just like having more births happening in 9 months because people are home more, not as much stuff to do.
Someone was saying the coronials,
totally.
They're coming.
Yeah, they're coming.
So I wanted to piggyback onto that to add for women. One of the most important things to look at for estrogen metabolism dysregulation is constipation, which is huge in our culture. Our standard American diet does not support healthy bowel movements. It doesn't. We need fiber. We need to have 5 to 7 cups of vegetables
and
every
water.
single day, and water, right? And that's something too to think about, you know, wearing a mask in this time. I'm not drinking enough water. Patients are getting headaches. They're feeling sick. They're feeling lightheaded. We need to remember to stay hydrated.
Right. Don't you have a little hole in the mask or a straw?
I'm waiting for that mask to come
out.
I
know. Yeah.
And for FDA approval too.
Right. I know. Yeah. We'll see what that looks like. Yeah. You know, and constipation, like you said, it's so common. You know, patients will come in and they say, oh, I only have a bowel movement once a week. I'm like, what?
And that's normal to them because that may be how it has been their entire life.
Right. It's normal. And then it, you know, having that shift happen where they are learning, retraining their whole bowel system is not an easy process for someone, especially when it's related. I know we're getting a little off track from fertility, but where it's related to, you know, this from trauma from when they were in a child and eating, I see so many things connected with that. They're like, I mean, I don't need to go down the whole rabbit hole, but it's just amazing when you look at the adults and they're like, oh yeah, this was part of my childhood. And I just learned like, well, I'll just hold it. Like I had a patient saying they weren't allowed to use the bathroom at school. And so it's like just, having to hold it all day just because of that, like that can create this whole pattern within your body system.
It really can. And I just want to say that the pelvic floor houses a part of the GI system.
Yeah, it totally
right? And
does.
so when we think about pelvic floor health and fertility and even and infertility, right? Our bowel health is directly associated to that.
Yeah.
Our large intestine, our descending colon and our sigmoid colon are completely, and our cecum, the connecting part of the small intestine and large intestine are in the pelvic floor space. And so sometimes the very first work that I do is releasing that tissue for a woman and allowing it, any restrictions in that fascial tension to allow, release it to allow mobilization so the body can do what it needs to do. So
it sounds like even physically, but also internally, like through detoxifying and letting the bowels move in that way too.
And so we can think about fiber, like if you're scrubbing a floor, a really dirty floor, right? You want a bristled brush, right? That's really going to help you scrub and get those toxins out, right? And so in order to do that, you need to have fiber. And that's where fiber comes into play, where it's so important because it just kind of clears the system out. And the reason bowel movements are so intertwined with estrogen metabolism is that when we don't have a bowel movement, the body reabsorbs cholesterol and estrogens and hormones.
Exactly.
Through the bowels, as opposed to just letting them go. So now we're making hormones in our own system, right? We're receiving hormones through our personal care products or scented, candles, through our environment. Right? And also toxic building syndrome is a real thing. You think about if you're going into an office that was just newly designed or newly built, then there's a lot of off-gassing in those facilities and places. And that is probably impairing. So now you have all these toxins, other toxins that are your body's trying to get out through your bowels, and estrogen and other hormones, and your body's reabsorbing them. So now you have the gamut, right? And it's just everything is recirculating. Nothing gets to leave the system. And so you need to have some recycling, right? We want that, but we also want things to exit the system and go, down into the trash and the wastewater.
Yeah. And the liver is such a huge part of that. It's like people don't understand, like, how's the liver connected to my hormonal system? Like, let me tell you, like, it's such a huge aspect of how our system works. And like you were saying, that recycling, it's just amazing to me how our body has been developed to naturally work on its own. And then how we can then put all these different factors in to throw it out of whack.
It doesn't take much on our end, to throw things out of whack. But if you really think about it, it's like a lifetime, of these of these insults.
Yeah, exactly right. Throwing it in there. Okay, let's see. I think we talked about all of those little things I wanted to get back on, but I think okay, go ahead.
I'm so excited. I want to share one, I test, so I'll do blood work, right? And test a lot of inflammatory markers. So C-reactive protein, homocysteine, and then 8-OHDG is another kind of more specialty marker that is specifically related to oxidative damage within the system. And so that's one that I've been looking at more and more. I've been starting to work with DNA labs. I hope it's okay to share, some of the labs that I've been using, but I really like them because they, you can, if you do them through a provider, you get a lot more out of the test. So you can go to their website and do it, but I would find a provider that offers their test.
Yeah. And can interpret it in a whole different way.
Exactly. But what's awesome about them is they actually do a lot of the interpretation for you, which I think is very consumer friendly, as opposed to having a lot of data that we don't fully understand.
Right. Like sheets and sheets and sheets of numbers. And they're like, I don't know what any of this means.
Exactly. So they break a lot down. And so they look at some of the genetic mutations that are involved in estrogen metabolism. So whereas maybe we're recycling more of our estrogen, right? Or our liver enzymes are not able to function properly and eliminate estrogens or other toxic burden and load. But these tests also look to see if a woman is going to have sensitivity to caffeine in her first trimester, and if maybe she should, keep levels below 100 milligrams. Right. And not drink coffee, if she's more susceptible to miscarriage if she were to have caffeine. They also look at whether or not we have the ability to convert beta carotene to retinoic acid, the active form of vitamin A. And one of the things that we found in women who have infertility in their ovaries is that they have what's called golden ovaries. So a lot of these women are not, they have these golden ovaries because there's a high amount of beta carotene. And you think, wow, that's probably a great thing.
Right.
But it actually means that they can't convert it to the active form of vitamin A. So there's it's like backup.
Right. In the
carotene.
System. Wow. Yeah. There's so many different factors that are connected. You know, we're learning so much about DNA, and we have this like little tiny piece in our huge book that we're discovering, you know, but I think when it comes, like you were talking about earlier, about how women can now, you know, we are the seed for the future generations. And it's also from that, having that key of the book for genetic knowledge. You know, it's like, how can we use the information to have, from a preventative standpoint, to be able to like, oh, you know, what do I need to have more in my system? What was my factor for my past generation? How can I change it for my future generations? And looking at that genetic information from specific companies, DNA testing, and using it as that powerful tool that we can have now, which is so changing every day. We're learning more and more about the DNA.
We are. We are. And to know that, you know, epigenetics, the way genes are expressed within each of us, can change based on our diet, our lifestyle, the amount of safety that we feel in our environment, right? Our stress.
Yeah. And it, you know, that's such a key point too, is, you know, when we see that message of information coming from a test or something, and I think that's true of a lot of different testing, maybe all of it, you know, it's just like it's just one picture in that moment in time. And we have so many factors that come into how our body lives, what the stress you were talking about earlier, like lifestyle, food, nutrition, water, sun, you know, so many different things around us that can change that genetic factor within us at any moment. You know, and so that's important for listeners to know, that it's like, if you're hearing someone say, you know, I think people get afraid. That's what I'm trying to get to, is don't take it as a piece of fear about your genetic information or genetic testing, but instead let it empower you to have it be a key piece where, how can I change it? How can I alter my DNA? Maybe I need more of this specific factor to help my brain function more, or maybe this specific factor to have better fertility, you know, as an empowerment tool.
Yes. I 100% agree that is that snapshot. Somehow what you were just talking about made me think a little bit about, you know, kind of coming back to the wholeness of it. And we were talking about the GI system, and, you know, we talked for a moment about kind of body shame that a lot of women and young children kind of get pushed into, that then shapes the way they eat, right? Where maybe we're eating more comfort foods, or we're afraid to actually eat more of the foods we need because we don't want to, right? We just have body shame.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, housed by our culture that doesn't belong to us as women. You know, we have the ability to do our work, to let that go, and to honor that it's not who we are, right? It's not us, it's the culture. And they're asking us to hold that kind of, that toxic information for them, so that they can get what they want, right? Through their media and, you know, us having to buy, you know, more and more products from them. So, but it made me think a lot about infertility and blood sugar dysregulation. And how blood sugar dysregulation, so you can think of 8-OHDG as being another oxidative damage marker, but actually you can just do it in A1C, a hemoglobin A1C. And what that test does is it determines the number of oxidized red blood cells, or glycosylated red blood cells. So red blood cells in the system last for about 90 days. And when they're in the bloodstream before they get taken out, if there's too much sugar, the sugar actually can bind to the red blood cell and make them incompetent red blood cells, essentially. That can then cause a lot more inflammation and damage and stress to tissue, especially reproductive organs, especially our end arteries, kind of our fingers, our toes, our eyes, our kidneys, you know, those areas. So there's damage that's happening in places we don't see if our blood sugar levels get too high. So, but also if our blood sugar levels are getting too low, this can happen as well. I mean, it's a little bit different, right? But damage can happen as well. And hormone regulation relies on a lot of healthy fats. Hormone regulation relies.
We need healthy fats, so we must have them.
Exactly. And it relies on regulation of blood sugar as well. So if we're not starting from diet and lifestyle kind of in that beginning, right?
Yes.
Then we're lost. So we
Right.
need to, go back to diet and lifestyle. Also, hemoglobin A1C and the way that
Mhm.
our insulin works relates back to epigenetics as well, right?
Yep.
If we aren't moderating our blood sugar and making sure it's stable throughout the day, if we're not getting healthy fats,
Mhm.
then we're going to have a toxic burden where our hormone
Yeah.
levels are going to be out of sync, out of whack, and we're not going to live, the very best life that we're here to live, that we have
Yeah.
the ability to live. So I
Oh,
wanted to come back to that, just that idea of body shame,
yeah.
telling women to eat less, to eat, to not eat certain things, or right, to eat only
Mhm.
comfort foods and
Right.
not feel like there's space to eat the other things, but there's space to eat the healthy things.
Mhm.
Those things, can really help to decrease stress, not just for the mind, but for the body as well. And when we come back to that place, the body is capable of anything.
Yeah. Food is medicine.
Food is medicine.
Yeah, food is medicine. The biggest one. Did Hippocrates say that? I think it was Hippocrates. um, okay, let's see. I think we talked about that. I want to make sure that we finished all of our little light bulbs as we were going through, and I think we did. I wanted to go back and talk about, so we were talking about fertility, and let's talk about, so you really highlighted the importance of prenatal or even preconception care. And how about the importance of that going through pregnancy and actually postpartum? Because I want to make sure we get to that topic, because we talked a little bit about it in relationship to the cesarean birth, but I think there's a much bigger picture there that I want the listeners to hear about.
Thank you for addressing that. So I will get a lot of referrals in a typical year
Mm-hmm.
for women who, talk to their best friends and they're going through postpartum depression or having a really
Mm-hmm.
difficult time in that postpartum time
Yeah.
frame. So I'll start here because it feels really important to me. Our culture
Mm-hmm.
is really invested in the birth of the baby. There's a lot of money in the birth of the baby.
Yeah. How
And
much does it cost now? Isn't it like almost $40,000 or something like that? Like, it's crazy.
I just read online, someone went in and they were in the hospital for 12 hours. They
Mm-hmm.
delivered a baby vaginally uncomplicated, and it was like $15,000.
That's
Now,
just
if you have a
crazy.
cesarean delivery, then it can be upwards of, 60, 70, $100,000, especially if your baby's in the NICU.
Yeah, and you have to stay for several days or even a week in the hospital.
Mm-hmm. So
Mm-hmm.
it's big. It's a big
Mm.
expense, especially, for parents that pay out of pocket.
Yeah, exactly.
So culturally, right, we put so much emphasis on the birth experience.
Mm-hmm.
And once the baby is born and the mom goes home, there's very little support for mom. So
Right.
thinking, right, that we really need to give back to moms, that there are a couple incredible authors. Kimberly Ann Johnson just came out with The Fourth Trimester, which is a great book if you want to
Mm-hmm.
learn more about how to support moms in that fourth trimester.
Mm.
And then The First 40 Days is another book that came out. It's all about nourishing the new mom. So
Oh,
that relates
nice.
into what we're talking about,
Right.
because nourishing the new mom is one of the most important things that we can do. So
Mm-hmm.
there is such a huge fluctuation of hormones that happens in the postpartum time frame,
Right.
where there's a surge of tremendous hormones, oxytocin, and then all of a sudden it just, kind
It
of
just turns
is
off.
gone.
It's like, wait, what happened?
And then a mother has the secretion of prolactin, which
Right.
suppresses, a lot of the other hormones in our
Mm-hmm.
system. And so a woman might not be getting as much progesterone, which can help
Yeah.
regulate our day-night cycles, which can just feel like a warm, cozy blanket around us, like holding
Right.
us and protecting us. So there's a lot of emotional vulnerability in that postpartum
Yeah.
time frame.
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
many different cultures. So we need to also think about building blood, right? If a woman has had blood
Mm-hmm.
loss, that's so
Right.
important. But we need to make sure that a woman is getting a really good prenatal vitamin and
Mm-hmm.
postnatal vitamin.
Mm-hmm.
And, nursing requires more calories than growing a human baby.
Wow.
So
That's crazy.
we don't often think about it. And, a woman needs to be well hydrated as well. And
Right.
blood sugar regulation is really important for hormone regulation.
Yeah.
So one of the most important things I find is making sure that women have enough B vitamins,
Mm-hmm.
that, they have enough red blood cells. And if not, then we need to be making sure that they're consuming foods to help build those red blood cells.
Yeah. So important. Yeah.
Soups, stews, collagen, things that help tissue heal. And then if a woman's had a cesarean birth, to think about, well, what are the things that we can do in that postpartum time frame to reduce scar tissue formation? So I really like bromelain. I really like digestive enzymes on an empty stomach, vitamin C. Obviously, people need to be connected with their healthcare providers, and their healthcare team is going to, be the best team to make decisions for an individual body. So I'm just throwing out nutrients that I use in my practice, but I tailor them very specifically to the person who's sitting in front of me.
Yeah, because it's individualized.
Which is all of our medicine.
Yeah.
But what's really cool is that we don't have, yes, we do individualized dietary recommendations, but anyone can pick up the first 40 days or the fourth trimester and utilize some of those suggestions in there for a friend, for a colleague, for a sister, for anyone. So I highly recommend that.
Oh, that's great. And those will all be in the notes, the transcription. So people will be able to see all that. And if I'll make sure that that's all available for our listeners, because those are some great references.
I really love those providers.
Yeah, that's great.
So what I want to share is, so my very basic prenatal is I want someone on a really good prenatal. Can I talk about brands?
Yeah, go ahead. Sure.
Okay. So some of the brands that I use, I really like Baby and Me by Integrative Therapeutics. I like Thorne Prenatal. I think they have a good one. And what's awesome is Thorne actually changed their prenatal to say prenatal and for lactating women.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
Yeah. Which is so important.
We need more of those nutrients in lactation than we do in pregnancy.
Yeah.
I have women on a fish oil. I also like Ben Lynch's Seeking Health prenatal brand.
Yeah.
I think they're really good. And in the preconception time frame, I really like phosphatidylcholine, a lot of antioxidants, vitamin C. Those things can be really beneficial in the postpartum time frame too.
Yeah, helping with the brain function too.
Yeah, and so when thinking about omega fatty acids, we need our EPA and our DHA, especially in the last trimester of pregnancy. Some people feel like, well, DHA doesn't cross into breast milk.
Right.
But I'm not so sure about, I'm not 100% sure. So I feel like mom could still use it for cognitive health in that postpartum time frame when there's such a huge dip in the hormones that help with cognition.
Yeah. They talk about what baby brain.
It's so true. Those sleepless nights, we need all the help we can get.
Yeah. So it sounds like there's a lot of great nutrients available to help with that postpartum time.
Yes. So that fish oil probiotic, making sure that your gut microbiome is in check, making sure bowel movements are happening.
Yeah. Especially if you had cesarean, right? And you had to have pain medication to help make sure you're getting that toxic load out of the system, but also the bowels are moving really well.
And especially, if a woman's had an epidural too, just to help flush all of those chemicals out of her system. If she's had an episiotomy or any kind of vaginal tearing during the delivery, that, collagen is really important to help tissue heal. And if you're a vegetarian, there are vegetarian sources of collagen now, which is so cool.
Yeah.
And I think I said a probiotic and vitamin D.
Oh yeah.
Obviously
vitamin D
your levels, but vitamin D is a really big one. And in that postpartum time frame, my biggest hitters are vitamin D, omega fatty acids, looking at blood sugar regulation, and making sure that mom has all the support that she needs.
Yeah, support team.
And space and time and compassion to know that this is different. And they don't say, they say, right, that it's the death of the woman, the birth of the maiden.
Yeah, totally moving into that.
Oh no, sorry.
The other way around.
The death of the maiden, the birth of the mother.
Yeah, right. The other way around. But I think something about that. We are all still maidens, just like, why do we have to have the death of the maiden?
I know. She'll come back out in my 60s.
Right, yeah, totally. For every moment.
In retirement.
I wanted to say one thing about, you mentioned vitamin D, and that's a key piece with the genetic testing too, because we're seeing so many people are having a genetic malfunction or disruption related to vitamin D, and knowing that going into that preconception phase,
Yes.
through the birth and postpartum is so important to the mother to have that support, because when we know there's so many factors of vitamin D, but one is mood. And I think a lot of people don't have that association with how important it can play in our mood.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And vitamin D, I mean, right, we're considering it's a hormone.
Right. Yeah.
It's not just a vitamin.
It's fat.
Yeah.
Or not necessarily, but it's part of our fat soluble vitamins.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we talked about that, and I want to make sure that we talk about some of the other things you're doing. So let's talk about your new supplement line, because I want to make sure we have time for that. So it's called V's Prescription, right? So V's RX.
Yeah, it's called V's RX. And one of the things that the supplement has a lot of are glutathione precursors.
Yay!
So selenium, N-acetylcysteine, vitamin C, which helps to recycle glutathione.
Mm-hmm. And this is just one supplement you have right now. Yep. You're showing the people that are watching the video, but if you're not watching it, what's the name of this one?
This one is called Immunavis.
Immunavis. Okay, great.
And what's awesome is it all the nutrients are safe for all of my clients. Yeah. So it was created so that the dosages are safe for someone to take just once a day, pretty much any body, but obviously connecting with your medical provider. And if someone needed a little bit more of an immune boost at a more therapeutic dose, they could just double that.
Oh, nice. That's
and
great.
Take it twice, which felt really, really wonderful.
Yeah.
And so what we know, right, is that anytime there's endothelial inflammation or inflammation in our systems, glutathione, our major antioxidant system, can help downregulate that inflammation. And so that's really important from a genetic perspective for fertility.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's so also important for the cells.
For immune health. And so the supplement has vitamin A, palmitate, vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin E. It has some zinc, some selenium, N-acetylcysteine, some quercetin, and some green tea leaf extract.
Nice. That sounds like a wonderful combination. I love all of those.
Thanks. And what I want to say is, pregnant women and women trying to conceive need to be really careful about the amount of vitamin A that they're getting. They need to be getting some, but to make sure if they're taking an added supplement, that they look at their prenatal and they check in with their medical provider to make sure they're not going over on their dosages.
Because it can be harmful.
Because vitamin A can be teratogenic.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super important. Thanks for reminding our listeners about that. There's so many different factors that come into pregnancy, which is great to have a provider on your team.
It is.
Yeah. And do you have any other supplements in the line, or is that your what do they call it? The flagship?
This is the flagship supplement. This is the first of many to come.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. I do a lot of teas in my practice, and for fibroids, for endometriosis, I do a lot of tinctures that I compound just kind of like in the office. Yeah. Specifically for a patient, for estrogen metabolism. And N-acetylcysteine is a big one for supporting the liver. Silybum, milk thistle is a huge one for estrogen metabolism, just kind of detoxing estrogens. So
wow,
just
that's great.
Putting that plug in there.
Yeah, oh, I love it. Yeah, thank you for sharing. And then, so how can people purchase this supplement and other future supplements? The best way to go to your website, or how are they available?
Yep, there's a link through Dericks Family Medicine. And there's also a website, vsrx.com.
Oh, nice. So great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing I want to share is with hydroxychloroquine, the idea, the mode of action is that it's a zinc iontopher. It allows zinc to enter the cell. Yeah. And that when zinc enters the cell, it basically slows down or stops viral replication. And that's really important. Zinc is also an incredibly important nutrient for fertility. Really,
I mean, for the prostate, right?
And for egg health as well.
Yep.
But there are natural products that act as zinc iontophers. Literally, iontopher just means ion transfer. It allows zinc into the cell through that phospholipid bilayer, right? Through that fatty membrane. And so the really cool thing is quercetin and ECGC from green tea extract are zinc ionophores. They allow zinc into the cell. And so my theory is that, you know, the hydroxychloroquine studies, some of them, right, they're not as effective as they would be if someone had in addition to the hydroxychloroquine, because a lot of these patients have lost sense of smell and taste, which is a sign of zinc deficiency already.
Yeah.
So if you're giving something that allows zinc into the cell, but there's no zinc, there's nothing to be done.
Right. Yeah. You got to have the zinc is such a huge, powerful player in, like you were saying, in the immune system and fertility. I mean, I just think there's so many different ways that it's, you know, it's interesting that people have a lot of deficiency in zinc. You know, I think that it's like, why is that happening in our specific place and time, you know, on the planet, you know, as we, like, just with vitamin D, we're seeing like more things come up as we're learning how to test different ways too. But I think, you know, it's interesting to look at the bigger picture, like, okay, well, why is our body changing and not absorbing this specific macronutrient anymore, you know, or vitamin or mineral? It's just very fascinating.
And so much, I think, you know, has to do with the way that we're monocropping, the way that our agriculture is, that, you know, we're not getting the same level of nutrients from our foods.
Yeah.
And then up the food stream, we're also not eating as much shellfish and seafood and other things that are really high in zinc too. So I think that plays a big role. But another thing to think about with zinc is that copper and zinc compete for absorption. And so if someone is taking a lot of zinc, they can actually become deficient in copper. So
yeah, it's important to watch both of those balances together. Yeah.
That's why it's important to have a well-versed provider on your side to help you do testing and check in with all of that.
Yeah, because you know, I let people know to not use Google as their doctor.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very key and important. Okay, let's also talk about. Can you spell? You said it's a VSRX, but I just wanted people to know how to find that. It looks like it's VISRX. Sorry, VISRX, and that would be the .com.
.com.
Okay, perfect. Okay, just so people can find it. And then, so you also mentioned that you're going to be having this women's retreat at Hollyhock coming up. Oh my God, that sounds awesome. Tell us more about it.
Yeah, so I came together with a colleague of mine many years ago to create a retreat. And it didn't end up happening. The timing wasn't right.
Yeah.
And so this year, Hollyhock reached out to me and they asked me if I would be interested in doing a retreat. And I said, actually, that'd be fabulous. And so the retreat topic is really about kind of re-embodying the feminine, igniting the wild within. So allowing women to come back to their true potentials, their desires, their dreams.
Wow. And
this really relates into the pelvic floor because through cultural indoctrination and through our patriarchy, we've given up our dreams. From a very young age as women, we've shut down our pelvic floor space, right? We're taught that if we want to get pregnant, or if we get pregnant, that it's the most irresponsible thing that we can do. That once we start menstruating, that it's a disgusting thing, that we need to have scented tampons, scented products, which is just crazy to me.
Another aspect we didn't even go into that's so awful.
Yep, that we can't even, you know, share like that wild cleansing experience that is happening within our bodies. That's very real, that there's shame around that. So we shut off from our pelvic floors and our pelvic bowls, from our creation, our places of creation and dreaming. And this retreat is all about helping women to re-embody back to that place, to help them root, to ground, to be with kind of the divine within their beings. And to rediscover, you know, what they want out of their lives, what their dreams are, not their partner's dreams, right? Not having dinner ready at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock or, you know, like tending to all the needs of the children in the household, but what do they want for their lives and then giving them tools to actualize on those dreams and to be connected to this creative, powerful place within them forever.
Wow, that sounds beautiful. How exciting.
A retreat to ignite. Thank you. It's a retreat to ignite fertility. But not just fertility of life, like bringing in, you know, human life, but the life within ourselves.
Yeah, which is so key, that creative spark within us all, right? And so it sounded like the date is fluctuating because of all of the, you know, the world that we're living in now, stuff is changing so much because of the pandemic. So where will people be able to find more information about it once it is happening? On your website?
They can find it on my website.
Okay, great. And then what are some other ways that you like people to follow you on Facebook or Instagram? What's the best way for people to know about what's going on?
Yeah, so I have a Facebook group. It is Holistic and Natural Therapies for Coronavirus COVID-19. So that is one way to kind of stay in touch with me. I also have Dericks Family Medicine .com, and there's a Facebook for that as well.
Great.
And then I've started creating a blog during this time, and people can come to my website and sign up for that, and also get information on fertility and detoxification and how to best support their lineage lines.
That sounds wonderful. And they can also make an appointment with you on your website too?
They sure can.
Perfect. Oh, great. Thank you, Dr. Beebe Dericks. It's been such a joy to have you on the show today. I think I could talk to you probably for like a bazillion hours, but I know I want to keep our time in check here. And so we'll have to have you back on again.
Thanks, Dr. Lulu. It's such a pleasure to be with you. I love your work, and I'm a true follower of everything you do.
Oh, thank you.